Welcome to International Securities Exchange's podcast series. Facilitated by renowned educators, ISE podcasts are intended to teach beginning as well as seasoned investors the ins and outs of trading. To find an updated list of podcasts, please visit www.isc.com/podcasts. Please be sure to listen to our important message following this episode regarding the risks of investing in exchange-traded options.
Mike, thanks again. Great presentation. We have a lot of questions here. I think you just handled my question, but I just want to ask it again. So how can the attendees, if they're interested in your services, is it just going right to m2sotbrokersexpress.com? Is that the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, just go either call the number on the screen.
Okay.
Not to quote Billy Mays, but operators are standing by. But give us a call or send an email. I'll be more than happy to tell us about our performance and how we've done in our Condors. Or if you want a portfolio review or whatever you want, send us an email or give us a call or visit our website.
Mike, it's interesting that you talked about everything you do because next week, business hedging, I'm going to give a general presentation on hedging. Haven't done it in a long time, and you and I were talking in Santa Clara, and I figured let me just give that presentation. It won't be as intricate as Mike, because Mike will personalize this. You know, he'll really ask you some questions. I'm going to give you a general, just an understanding on how you can hedge, because I'm sure out of all the attendees we have today, some of you are listening in Europe, you could be in the Middle East, you're in Japan, you're in Australia, wherever you're, Canada, that's where I am right now, the UK, and you want to hedge, then I'll be going through that presentation next Tuesday. But if you wanted to deal with just more personal, then you can just contact Mike, because he can really help you in not only that, but in any kind of options situation. Mike, let's take some questions. The first one is, and I get this question often from Yvonne. She says that she's traded FX, but she's not ever traded options or futures. She'd like to know the difference between the ISE EUI and the FXE, which is, I believe, the ETF. Is that correct, Mike? Are you familiar with FXE, or is that I think that's what that one is, right?
I believe FXE is the ETF.
Yeah, that's an ETF, correct? Let's just assume that it is. Do you mind going through what the difference between an ETF and an option?
Okay, yeah, absolutely. ETF, there's a lot. ETFs are probably the big talk in the business today, in that there's ETFs can do it. There's ETFs that'll actually come out and clean your house. And,
good point. I mean, right? Now. They actually invent millions of them every day. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, they have them on everything right now. If you're looking to invest in an ETF, and full disclosure, I've never traded FXE before, but from my understanding of it, if you want to invest like a stock and have exposure to the euro, that could be a way of doing it. Now, what EUI is, that's the index itself, in that you don't have to, if you're looking to be a premium seller and you don't want to worry about early assignment because it's European settled, it's a cash settled option, then EUI would be something with which you could trade to get that. In terms of having exposure to the euro, one thing that you could do is you could just buy a call option on EUI, and you'll have exposure to the dollar increasing against the euro. It's all dollar-based, and EUI is an index, FXE is an ETF.
I like to say, for those of you that are from the equity world, just think of what's the difference between IBM and an IBM option, right? We could spend, Mike and I could spend 6 hours on that. So it's not something that we could really talk about in a sentence or two, even though we need to in this sort of venue. But Mike explained it perfectly clearly, is that, one is an option, and one, you're basically making a prediction on the underlier, and you're going to, obviously, it is just a one-dimensional, you're either up or down. With options, you can select time frames, strike prices, various option strategies. With the ETF, it's just up or down.
Absolutely.
All right, Mike, here's another one from another Mike. And Mike says, do you choose your strikes based on the deltas?
Yeah, well, in our proprietary Condor strategy, and like I said, I don't want to get too much into that on this because this is more about education. What we usually do is we look for a 7 delta or a negative 7 delta on the put side, or a positive 7 delta on the call side, and then we take it from there, so to speak. And we have our red flags as to when we would get out of it. For like 25 delta is when we have a red flag of either when we'll get out of the option or we'll make an adjustment. That's our red flag, so to speak. And like I said, if you'd like to learn more about that, I don't want to be too salesy on this, so to speak. Feel free to contact us. I'd be more than happy to talk with you about that on a one-on-one level.
And Mike, I guess this is very similar. Mike was talking about how you get in. Andrew wants to know how you get out. I think you just sort of referenced that point, right?
Yeah, like I said, we're either going to adjust or we're going to get out of the trade. The thing that we definitely do for sure is we have a plan going into it, and we're not just frantically buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell, buy, sell. That's the bottom line.
Right. Let's see, what else? This is just an observation that I have since I I don't know if I've, in the last year or two, given as many presentations as Mike, but I do quite a few. And, I've never heard that sort of perspective of the arrogant Condor trader, although I love it because when I teach investors the use of options and they learn this iron Condor, they do, and I have to steal that from Mike, they do become arrogant because they say, well, as Mike said, what's the likelihood of it moving 9, 10, 11, 12% in X number of weeks? This is a proverbial lock. I want to caution everyone on that one because obviously if you're selling out of the money options, it looks like a lock, and that's why Mike was trying to say you really need to understand your own personality and have a methodology, and I think he's willing to teach that, or obviously there are a lot of books out there you can do it, but you need to have discipline. Do you mind just going back to discipline, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of just having a plan before you get into the trade, one thing that I know that I've said many times at an in-person presentation, I always point out to where the exits are in the room. And I say, okay, right now, if the room were to fill with smoke, now I have a plan. I can get down on my hands and knees, and I can crawl out of the room. But if I didn't know where those exits are, it's very likely that the old saying would hold true for me: when in danger or in doubt, run in circles, scream and shout. Right. And that's something that I think it relates to the marketplace, and that as it's going against you and you have that fear that you're going to lose everything, or you have that greed that you want to stay in it and not admit that you're wrong, whatever the case may be, I think it's something that's just best taken care of before you get into a trade, not only on the FX world, but in anything.
That's a great point. Great point. Question for me from Mike, and he wants to know how far you can trade. How many months do these options go out? It's actually 10 or 12 months. For those of you that are familiar with options, they have option cycles. So when we release a new cycle, let's say when June just ended, we brought on the new Junes, and so we actually had 12 months. Normally it's a 10-month. That's the normal cycle, if you will. They go out 10 months. However, every 3 months they actually go out 12 months. So it's plenty of time to come up with your forecasts and your strategies.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. To find more podcasts on options, stocks, alternative markets, and market data, please visit www.ise.com/podcasts.